Thank you to everybody that's watching this and joining us live. Really good crowd here on Zoom, and a quick shout out to my colleague Katie Source, who is helping us to also restream this live on our Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube platforms. So thank you to everybody for your time, and hopefully this next hour will be of interest and value to your organization. For those of you that are here on Zoom, please chat and add questions throughout. If there's anything in particular that either a question you might have for the panel or even anything specific to your organization that might be of benefit to the broader group, we'd love to try to answer those in real time. And if we run out of time, we'll certainly follow up with you offline. For folks that are on social media, we'll try to monitor comments throughout. But again, if we don't have time to get to your questions, we'll follow up with you offline. So again, thank you for everybody that's joining us. And also, I think it's important to point out for those of you watching this in the future on demand, this is being recorded on January 28th, 2021. Some of the technologies, processes, things change very quickly, especially in a digital environment. So I wanted to mention that because if you're watching this 6 months or a year from now, some of these things may change a little bit. But I think in general, the fundamentals we'll cover today are pretty solid and relatively timeless. So let me just briefly introduce our panel. First, I want to introduce Dan Dinsmore. He is the founder and CEO of Overit. Dan had founded Overit in '93, and really in the earliest days, this is pre-internet, back in CD-ROM technology, really brought our company and a lot of our clients into that environment. And he was really one of the first adopters and strong advocates for digital measurement. He saw the potential in the internet, in automation tools, and even emerging social media a few years later, and looking at how that can actually be a very measurable platform, how that can be a very measurable and important lead gen platform for our clients. Part of the reason that he and our other panelist, Chris Fasano, also get along so well. So introducing our other panelist, Chris Fasano, Dr. Fasano. Chris is a PhD neuroscientist and really looking at an interesting combination of, so as a scientist, as a trained academic research scientist, very adept in human behavior. And in particular, focusing that interest area in digital behaviors for consumers in particular. How do people make decisions? What are their pathways? What are those online behaviors? Looking at that as not only, Chris will help set up dashboards and strategies for our clients, but in particular, looking at, predictive analytics, based on what was happening before, how do we recommend you spend your dollars, or what do we recommend you do different in the future to really optimize accounts? And I am Paul Fahey. I'll be your host and moderator today. So in a minute, I'll turn the conversation over to Dan and Chris, and I'll be looking for questions and comments throughout. So again, thank you to everybody that's joining us today. Let me first throw the conversation to Chris. Chris, we're going to be talking a bit about sales enablement, and in particular, would love to have you just kind of give us some table setters. Let's just get on the same page. I think this conversation is going to be relevant to a number of different types of organizations, anything from healthcare to services to home services, and even to organizations of various sizes. So I know we're going to try to keep the conversation relevant, whether you have a marketing department of 1 or you're fortunate to have a marketing department of 100. I think there'll be something here for everybody, but why don't we start and just get everyone on the same page about sales enablement and certainly why it matters.
Yeah, so I mean, sales enablement is sort of you can go online and look and see a lot of different definitions and a lot of different approaches to it. And I think today, for what we want to do here today is, we want to use this opportunity as a sort of a business mindfulness moment. So like in any advancement, in any way to move forward, the first thing you have to do is recognize something. Recognize either that there's a problem in something or there's a value in getting somewhere else. And I think around sales enablement, this is really true, right? Really having that sort of take stock, look at your processes, and try to understand how I can make them better, especially in regard to sales and marketing. And I think Dan is going to touch on this in a few slides. But really, when we're talking about sales enablement, we're talking about unifying your marketing and your sales processes. That's really what it is. It's getting the two aligned, and a lot of the times that's really not the case for most businesses. So I started with this slide because I think that it really, for me, sort of drives home really what the true value in getting a good sales enablement strategy and building a process. So this is just some data from a client, but it could be relevant for any business, right? The goal, increasing sales is the goal of any business, right? You want to grow your revenue, you want to increase sales. And traditionally, you think about it philosophically, the only way or the major way I'm going to increase sales is by getting more leads to sell to. But that's not, in fact, always the case. Obviously, the more opportunities you have to sell, you then have more opportunity to raise your revenue. But what I wanted to do is show you on this graph on the left is just a plot of revenue of dollars in over the course of time. 2000, I believe it's 15. There's no need to be able to read. It's just, you can see the graph is increasing over time and steadily going up. And that is a trend that we hope all businesses see. And that's what we try to help our clients achieve. When you look on the right, it's the same line plotted in red, but there's an overlay in blue bars, and the blue bars are the leads coming in, or estimates in this case for this service in this business. And what you can see there is that that does not correlate to increases in revenue. There is a plateau, and in fact, the decrease in inbound leads, but the growth of the revenue continued. So they were able to continue to grow sales and increase their dollars in, and they didn't have the same number of leads coming in. And the reason why that can happen is because like if there was, for example, there was a fixed conversion rate there, right? Let's say the conversion rate was always 20%. Well, then you have to continue to grow your leads in order to hit those revenue targets, right? But if you have a process that not only is sort of focused on generating new leads, but also making sure you convert every single one of those leads that come in, one, and two, focusing on your customers you've already sold to, then you can alleviate some dependence on those outside leads and really maximize your dollars, your lifetime value, all of those things that matter to you to really start to grow your business. So I wanted to frame the conversation with some data to show you real world data of why increasing your processes, why aligning your sales and marketing really, really matters. So we can go to the next slide. These are just some statistics. So that was some data that we've acquired through actual implementation of process. These are just some statistics we found out there about why sales enablement matters. You can find a lot of these out there. Some of the ones we really liked, including the first one there, 59% of companies that surpassed their revenue targets, and then 72% that exceeded them by 25% or more have a defined sales enablement functions, compared to only 30% of underperforming organizations. I think that stat really speaks for itself, right? We listed some of the sources here. Companies with a sales enablement team are 52% more likely to have sales processes aligned with their buyer journey. Dan's going to get into that a little bit more. That's one of the key parts of sales enablement. What is the journey of the buyer, of the customer? Over 75% of companies using these tools indicated that sales increased over the past 12 months, for 40% growing of more than 25%, which is an excellent rate. And then the last one there, 74% of businesses that use CRM and marketing automation have aligned marketing and sales departments. And what I want to point out in that last one is you don't need marketing automation to have a good sales enablement process. But when you have a good process that's sales enabled, you can leverage automation and use your CRMs much more efficiently. And that's really where you're going to take your business to the next level. And I'll give you some examples of that. So we can go on to the next slide. I'll turn it over to Dan to get into some of the nuts and bolts of sales enablement.
Thanks, Chris. So next slide, Paul. So basically, sales enablement, just for a brief description, aligns your sales and marketing efforts by improving your internal systems, arming your team with the proper tools and information, as well as content. They need to sell more effectively. And by unifying these systems together and arming your employees with actually actionable data, you set them up for success better. It's all too common for marketing and sales to function as two completely different departments. We see it all the time. But those objectives can appear very different. But marketing generates leads, sales closes them. And what we're really trying to accomplish with sales enablement is bringing those things together to work hand in hand and leveraging each other rather than working completely separately. Next slide, Paul.
I think real quick, Dan, one comment here is that a lot of people still don't think that the two should be aligned and work together. Like I know with our clients, we'll talk about how many leads do we get this month, right? And I'll say that. And my next question to them is how many of them did you sell, right? And how many of them did you close, right? So they have to be completely aligned and they have to be in the conversation. People say, well, why does a marketing agency care about sales? Well, they have to be together, right? Because the only way the company grows is if you're closing those leads and you have an efficient process to close them. Otherwise, nobody grows. So I think it's really very, very important that we don't think about them as two separate entities.
Absolutely. So with sales enablement, you want to take a few steps towards those things. One, you want to be enablement focused, which is basically having resources and support to help your salespeople produce more effectively. A big thing that we're constantly working on is customer centric. An enablement process is used to further enhance that customer experience and as well as the customer journey. And that's in all touch points. We want to look at our content. Enablement content is broken down into two main resources for helping customers: resources for salespeople and helping customers with that information. Technology, having the proper technology stack is kind of critical to support your enablement. CRM integrations, communication tools for your texting or email, marketing automation is obviously a big need. Could go into things such as reviews platforms, chat, voice applications, and so on. And really taking a good look at your technology and doing an assessment is kind of a critical foundational element when looking at sales enablement. Training, providing sales with training on how to use what they're given or simply capitalize or leverage it. Measurement, organizations should be measuring the effectiveness and have clear insights and data. And that kind of piggybacks off of the technology component to make sure that you're measuring things correctly, knowing what's working and what's not. And then refinement. You should definitely be refining all of your implementation for improvement. Looking at data, it can be fun and it can be easy. It's identifying some goals and objectives when you're doing your sales enablement process. Next slide, Paul. So one of the big pieces that we've really seen is people clarifying their objectives, companies clarifying their objectives. And we know that increasing revenue is the main objective for most people, but it's good, but it's not exactly good enough. Increasing active selling time is a very good objective. Most sales folks spend approximately 30% of their time actually selling. And sales enablement, we've seen, and can push that number up to 60% or more. So when you're enabled and you're actually leveraging the tools and the process, you're really, really lending a hand to your sales team. That's going into eliminating manual work, redundancies, streamlining that process, and it helps them focus more on the sales component. Creating more customer touch points that are personalized. That's basically throughout the process, gaining information and knowing more about your client or customer or person visiting your website, so on and so forth, and gathering more information to really play into your content strategy. Knowing your customers better plays hand in hand with that, engaging with them, focusing on that journey, both brick and mortar as well as digital. That is a very, very key component of data collection that we've seen work very well for us. Creating your customer journey experiences, part of sales and marketing. It's really key if the customer journey isn't just for developing new clients, but also for your current clients. As an example, I recently bought an Apple Mac Mini or whatnot, and it got sent to my house. As soon as I signed for that package, I got a text, I got a call to see if they wanted help setting it up, or I just wanted videos and I didn't want to talk to anybody. And that really reinforces, how they're using technology and communicating and really enhancing your current client touch points as well. Go to the next slide.
Hey, Dan, one thing here, sorry, is this is something that I hear and see a lot. So when you talk about eliminating redundancies and manual work, that's a really big deal. And what we never want to hear from our clients is, hey, you guys, we have so many leads coming in, we can't handle it. We can't, we're losing things, right? So with that, there are a lot of ways to work leads, to move things through funnels, to continually engage without actually having to do it all with people on the phone and actively selling. You can actively be selling, but in a way that's smart. And I think that's something too that the sales enablement process really will help define, because you can identify those touch points where we can remove that sort of individual touch and put some automation to sort of get rid of some manual work that will allow for a better operational infrastructure.
Absolutely. Yeah, next slide, Paul. Chris is absolutely right. And, as when we're looking at these types of things, we get a lot of questions like, what is sales enablement? People have a difficult time grasping the concept, or how are they going to actually implement it? And we just wanted to give you kind of a breakdown, a very, very high view of how we do it as an agency. Now, many of you are going to be doing this internally, but we did want to kind of point out, what our general process is as we're working through the sales enablement onboarding. The first thing we do is discover. We're going to look at all the steps in your sales process, and we're going to document them. If you have customer service representatives, we're going to actually listen, capture a sample size of recordings, discussions, in-person meetings for all the steps that you have throughout that process. It could be going on a sales call or a ride along, whatever it needs to understand the initial process of that sales. Meeting with multiple salespeople on your team, talking to them, and really looking to identify inconsistencies, differences, and where they exist, and we document those things. And I think that's a very critical component of looking at, documenting what your sales process is, getting technical, looking and discussing your CRM needs, your ideas, how you're operating. And from that information, we'll create a visual workflow of that current process with detailed documentation. And then what we do next is we take a look at how we're going to combine marketing and sales to create a newly recommended visual workflow with documentation. So that would include your sales process, but integrated in with your initial funnels, your marketing automation, if we're considering, email, text, voice applications, voice on demand, printing on demand, phone calls, when we're going to pick up the phone and call, so on and so forth. So we're creating a new visual workflow and identify where our clients need to be trained on that. Then we solidify our tools and our measurement needs, really looking at what are the KPIs, what are the goals, how are we measuring, are they meeting our objectives? And that's critical. And then implementation and training, identifying that training process, and then we proceed to actually implement these pieces together. And we can go on to the next piece, which is, I do want to mention, when we implement these pieces together, and we'll get back to this reoccurring theme of refine, it's an ongoing process. This is not a static environment. When you're looking at sales enablement, we're always going to be looking to increase conversion, sales, engagement, content. So those are things that are ongoing. So this is not just, set it and forget it. Although many of these operations are automated, we want to be looking at the data and improving this over time. It only benefits your company or your effort that you're looking to do. And you'll hear me quite often talking about understanding the customer, understanding that buyer's journey, who that customer is, and how are they getting closer to you and your product and your brand. So, what that means is going very deep beyond basic pain points and challenges, going deeper than just superficial demographic data. We need to analyze buying signals, trigger events, and then assess that behavior, which Chris is immensely good at. Anticipate what they'll need and what they're going to need to feel confidence and trust in your brand, your product, or your organization. So providing educational information that benefits them, that's not just a sales pitch, giving them valid information, helpful information along that buyer journey is critical. And that kind of goes hand in hand with your content strategy. which we find as one of the main key components within sales enablement is having a strong content strategy. And then utilizing multiple communication methods, such as text, SMS, email, and voice applications, and so on and so forth. So all these things kind of go into a big emphasis placed on your customer and their journey. From there, Paul, you can go to the next slide. We want to align that sales journey and that user journey. So documenting the buyer's journey and documenting that sales process and aligning them is key. The customer is the most important part. Looking at the experience of the buyer, the various touch points and engagement with your company, considering how you're going to optimize and design that funnel to each point along the way, providing necessary resources, content, tactics to customers when they want them and how they want them. And that is all based on getting that information. And again, it can sound overwhelming, but there are very simplistic ways of basically collecting this information and following the customer journey. Next slide, Paul. Content. Developing your content strategy. And also, I just want to mention developing a strong library. You may have many resources within your organization that you've already created that can be hugely leveraged within your sales enablement process. They might be 3 years old. They might be something you put out and it's there. I think taking stock and taking a good content audit of your current content is a great place to start. And sometimes when we've definitely found that content is just not leveraged properly, and it can be reutilized and repurposed so that you're getting true value out of that investment that you're putting into your content. And obviously a strong content strategy is the engine basically behind your enablement effort. And you can see there's a list here, different types of items, ebooks, videos, FAQs, surveys are huge, YouTube series, podcasts, webinars, newsletters. You get the point. There's just a ton of content. And the game has changed where you do need a mass amount of content to stay relevant. And how do you develop those things and how do you engage your audience? So you definitely want to take stock in your content and leverage as much of it as you possibly can.
And then one comment here is that once we have the sales enablement process, once we've done the research, sort of done the workflows, outlined, identified the touch points and all of these things, where we're going to interact with those customers, then it really becomes an endless game. If you have the content, you can just start sending it to them at all these different points, and you can send them as many things or as little things as you have. And the more diverse bucket of the more I can reach into that content bucket and pull out something different, the more you're giving someone a fresh, sort of take on what you have to offer at the right time in the right place of the journey. So you build the infrastructure, you build your process, you overlay some automation, and then you have all the content to sort of feed.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm just going to keep harping on it. You can go to the next slide, Paul. It's implementation, analyzing, rinse and repeat and improve. Sales enablement strategy is going to consistently change over time, and you need to use your data to implement that change. And just keep in mind that, again, enablement is not static. It's something you want to adopt, but you also want to be looking at all the data that's coming in and refining and improving it. Your tools, your processes, the delivery systems and the technologies are always being created, adopted, and tested. So tracking, analyzing, improving upon that program, I would look at that as something you're going to do year over year, month over month, to really leverage yourself. And the key takeaway here is that the reason that you're going to invest in that and the reason you're going to take the time to do this is because you're going to see results. The ROI is pretty tremendous when you get a solid implementation project into place. And again, just going back to clear objectives and goals, without them, you're not going to know what's working and how to adjust it or where to pivot. So Chris, I think, it's a good time for you to kind of take a look at some of these other items that you had mapped out here.
So So for the next part of this, we're about 25 minutes in. We're not going to try to take up your entire hour here. We've made this a little bit shorter so we can have some time for discussion. I think with our goal with any webinar is to introduce a topic that we feel is valuable, and this we know is incredibly valuable, and we want all of you to leave with having a sense for what that value is. How can you possibly get started in this process, and maybe what it looks like a little bit when the process has been taken from point A all the way through, right? So that's what we're going to do in this last section here. I'm going to show you some and the workflows are a little bit more example. And it's not necessary to read through every step, but I just want you to appreciate, first thing that we took away from this was that there's a lot of steps here, and that green box is where the payment is taken, right? So Paul, if you wouldn't mind, if you could go to the next and back and forth just slowly, and I just want you to see, if you can go back and then you can see the difference. You can see that what we try to do is eliminate some of those blue boxes and, take away some of the time. Okay, you can go back to this ball. So what we try to do is say, okay, here's what your process is. You have 14 or 15 steps before a payment is taken. We feel that's too long. So we're going to try to cut that back, and we're going to take that down to 10 steps. And then we don't want you to ever hang up with the new lead on the call. We want to see if you can get them all the way through without actually having them get off the phone. So this is the sort of analysis that we're doing. This is part of that customer journey that Dan was talking about. This just happens to be on the phone listening in. We do all of the scenarios. If you're commercial, residential, however you're selling, we gather info, we do our intel, we listen, and we start to build out these workflows. And these workflows are going to inform the process that we build. Next slide. So that's one part of it. One part is, if people are inbound calling, we listen, we talk, we understand what you guys are hearing. The other part is people are shopping without you really knowing, and they're on your website, they're looking around, and there is sort of defined patterns, or I like to say digital code breaking that we do, which is where you go in and you sort of look into where they're going. What are they clicking on? When someone goes here on this page, is there a pattern? Do they start going down a road, or is it completely sort of random? And can we make that randomness go away? Can we sort of funnel them into a certain pattern and define the user journey? And we do that by looking at digital analytics tools, behavioral tracking, and just try to get a better sense for the digital footprint of your customer. So now we looked at the digital component on website, offsite interactions, how they click on ads, how they looking, all of that. We've listened to phone calls. We've talked to customer service representatives. We actually do our own sort of maybe window shopping where we call, and we pretend that we're a customer or something like that. And we get our intel, and we're starting to define the journey and the process. Next slide. Now, once we have all of this information and we've talked to your company and we put it all down, the first real step in the process of the sales enablement is defining your funnel. So we have to build a funnel where we know we're going to drop and push those perspectives and the customers in. So this work I'm going to present to you now is done by our senior automation specialist, Eileen Parzek. I want to give her the credit here because the next set of data and information I'm going to show you comes from her. And she's a really tremendous asset with years of knowledge and a really, really beautiful ability to 360 view how this all ties in. And so here is an example of the funnel. And what you see in the funnel is you have stages, right? Unqualified lead, a marketing qualified lead, and then it gets down to the funnel, and you either close that lead or you don't. The other thing I want you to appreciate on this funnel is that at the bottom of the funnel, typically the funnel gets tapered at the bottom and then ends. But if you can see here, it starts to reopen up again. And what that does is just because you sold to that customer once doesn't mean that you can't continuously sell to them again and over again. So that makes its own funnel. And there's a process for that as well, right? Because remember, as we showed in the first slide, it's not, sometimes leads go away. We've known that more than ever this year in the pandemic, where we've seen things really, really hit. So you have customers you're already selling to. Can we upsell? Can we cross-sell? Can we promote other things, right? This is all part of the process. So what you have in the funnel are, what are the stages? And then the next part is, how does that lead move from stage to stage? That's really important, because we want to understand what actions are necessary for them to go from unqualified to marketing qualified, or whatever the stages we deem to be. So the first step here is using the data we've taken in from the audits, build a funnel. Okay, so then the next slide. So now, again, what's on this is not necessary. You don't have to squint and fight to see. I just want to sort of outline some of the steps here. So now what Eileen has done in this schematic is she's taken that information from the research, the discovery phase. She's looking at all of the possible ways somebody can come inbound. So they come in through organic search, they come in through an application on a phone, they come in through a phone call, they come in the actual brick and mortar, they come in the store, they come in the institution, wherever they come in. She starts to diagram how we track that. Okay, so now this is called attribution. So we're going to make sure we know where they came from, how they got to us, and then where do they go to get into that funnel? Because by the time they go into the funnel, we want to make sure we know exactly where they came from, how they got there, what were the steps, what were the notes, what was everything that happened to get them in the funnel. Okay, so that's the first step. Mapping, you can see how really beautiful and branched these diagrams and details. And every branch point here is a potential opportunity for us as the marketing team to sort of push or influence that customer to be better sold by the sales team. And this is sort of where the unification comes in. All right, so now we're building out your inbound lead workflow. Next slide. And then here is sort of it in together now. So here we have on the left, your inbound traffic. This is just looking at sort of call inbound, web inbound, how it gets tracked. And then you can see those arrows pushes it into the funnel. They make their way through the funnel in some way. We either sell them or we don't. But regardless of what happens, that purple sort of evergreen circle there means that when they get into that funnel, into this sort of ecosystem, we can continuously market to them now, no matter where they are. And we're going to be speaking to them differently depending on where they are. So if they're at the very top of the funnel, we have campaigns to speak to them in a certain way, because we know the best way to move them down. Now, if they've already been sold, then we're going to speak to them differently. And if we lose them, if they say, you know what, I'm good, thank you, I appreciate it, but I don't want your service, well, we still want to talk to them and we still want to nurture them down the road, right? So this sets the framework now, taking all of the discovery information that we've learned. We've built out a new workflow. We know how we're going to capture, attribute, place, advance in the funnel. And this is sort of the real global 30,000 foot view of what the process of sales enablement can lead to on a one sort of summary schematic. On the next slide. Okay, so this is more just to show you the detail here and how much goes into this process. So what you're looking at here is a workflow diagram of what happens on yellow. So if you can see on the top, you got those. This is how those statuses change. So this is Eileen documenting, well, they come in here, where did they come from? What's their lead stage? And then underneath it, it's what happens to get them to the next funnel. So if this happens, they go to here. And if they do this, this, and this, then go to here. And if they do this, this, and this, go to here. If they don't do this, take them here. So what we're doing is we're defining that journey. We're defining the progression through the funnel. And then at the end, at the top, they close or they don't. And then that's on the bottom. Now it's split. So, okay, they close, they go here, and they don't, they go here. And this is obviously very detailed, but it's all in this detail where the magic sort of happens, right? So this is which looks like very confusing schematic, but if you could actually go through one by one, you could see it's very logic based. If this, then this. If not this, then this. Okay, so that's this slide. The next slide. Okay, so now we can start to build out those campaigns that Dan was talking about where the content really fits in. So this is sort of a lead nurture strategy. So we've determined based on our research and on discovery that in like every business, there are people that just are not sales ready. You know, they thought they were, but they decided that they weren't ready to buy, they weren't ready to join, to become a member, to buy your service. but that doesn't mean that we can't continue to sell or market to them. So we create lead nurture campaigns. When they get to that status, not sales ready, and whether that's an inside CSR, manually saying they're not ready, or it's an automated, sort of stage that qualifies them as not ready, they drop into this campaign. And in this campaign, we have very defined actions over periods of time that educate them, sends them a piece of content, sends them a statistic, sends them something relevant, sends them an offer, right? And we're continually engaging them. And therefore, like Dan said, we've increased your selling time and you're not doing anything, right? All you've done is created a system that's selling for you. And so we've actually increased your selling time and decreased the manual work that you're doing. So this is a good example of how sales enablement can actually make your process much more efficient and sell when you're really not even actively trying to sell. Next slide. Okay, this is that inverse funnel where I converted them. Great, we sold it, awesome, they're now a customer, but we're not done yet, right? And so we want to thank them for being a customer. And then we want to show them how great it is to be a customer. So we're going to show them all the things we're doing in the community, all the things we're doing here. And then we have a great offer for our new customers. We're going to let them know that. And then we have a new service that we've added that we think this customer would be good at, because our sales enablement process built in what we call tagging mechanisms, where every time you buy a service, you get tagged, and you get tagged with certain things. And those tags tell us what other services you might be interested in, just on the basis of tags. So we can say, if service X, then they might like Y and Z, and then we can build campaigns like that. So this is an example of how the sales enablement process can help you get more lifetime value out of the customer, which is really where you're going to make the most money from all of the data that says you make the most money from the customers you already have, right? It's cheaper that way than it is to acquire new customers. Next slide. And we only have a few more of these, and then we can open it up. Upsell. This is sort of another example of an upsell. We talked about the new customer, and here's what that looks like in schematics. So they come into the map is your marketing automation platform, and then we have campaigns to upsell and cross-sell. And once they do upsell or cross-sell, it goes back into our system and lets us know, hey, service X customer, they also now are service Y customer. So now they have two tags, they're X and Y. It leaves open Z if we want to sell them on Z later, right? So we can get all of this data out there or in our system. Next slide. And then the last, I think these are the last example I have is just renewal and referral campaigns, which is again, more of the same idea of, you have a customer, well, maybe they can recommend someone else to the business, right? Let's build a campaign about that. Or if they have a subscription, right? A lot of services are subscription based, 6 months, a year. Well, don't wait until they, it's time for them to go and then you have to call and sell them again. Let's get that automated. Let's get them automatically engaged and renewing. So we don't really have to worry about that. Again, increasing your selling time, decreasing the manual work. And this all comes from us understanding that in your customer journey, there is a period where they might actually drop off as a customer. So we get ahead of that. Or one of the analyses that I just ran for one of our clients was I looked at their history and said, about 1.5, average 1.5 years in this service, that's when people start to cancel. There's like a time where it's somehow, in this service, after they've had it for a year and a half, people start to cancel at a higher rate. So knowing that, we build a campaign for about 1.2, 1.1 years, right? And we get ahead of that. And we make sure they understand the value of their product, the value of their service, so that next month when it's time for them to say, you know what, I don't need this anymore, it makes it a lot more difficult for them to leave because we've educated them on the value they're getting. Okay, just some examples of the benefits to that. And then last slide on this process is once you have it, there you go, thanks, Paul. Once you have the infrastructure, the campaigns are endless. They really are endless. I mean, it gets to be a little crazy with the amount of stuff you can do. This is just a document that Eileen put together showing, initial campaigns, future campaigns, lead nurture, retention, all the things I showed you outlined, documented so that we know exactly, hey, for someone that dropped out and they didn't close, what are those campaigns? Well, let's pull up our lead nurtures and we can look through it. Anything you want to do, once you have this infrastructure that you've identified, we built based on the information in your enablement process you've identified, you can really build endless campaigns to support your sales efforts. And then the last slide before we can open this up is, the funnel is, you're packing everything in at the top. Your goal is to squeeze as much out of that lemon as possible, right? Again, sometimes there's going to be a drought. You're not going to be able to find lemons, right? And we still need to make the juice, still got to make the lemonade. Well, this process, if you're really humming and you really have a good infrastructure, you're going to be able to get every last drop out of those lemons that you have and not have to worry so much if some of those lemons go short and we can't get enough in. So that's really the goal. Make the most out of what you have, build an efficient system, align your marketing and sales so that you can continue to grow even in the face of some sort of drought or when leads are not as abundant as they were. And especially for businesses that have fixed geographical radius, right? If you're not expanding your brick and mortar or you're not growing, well, leads eventually might plateau. And that's okay, as long as you have a process to continue growing your business. So I think that's it.
Yeah, I mean, even in sales and marketing, what we're seeing and where we're kind of headed is that there needs to be a focus, even from your marketing team and your sales team, have to have some concern about the service and support and the customer journey. So customer service, everything within enablement can be applied to customer service as well. So that these are tools and things that you can be looking at and applying them in various areas, because as we move forward, part of marketing will be how is that our customers really providing value service throughout their engagement, not just in the initial sales process. So it was just something I wanted to mention, as well as that was a killer picture, Chris, of a lemon.
It was a terrible picture of a lemon. Thanks, Dan.
No problem.
I think that's
Chris. One of the questions that came in, and this was from somebody on our Facebook Live feed, there was a comment that said, I kind of get the basics, but how do I get started? Like if there was a single starting point, maybe if you or Dan could touch on that.
You, me, Dan?
I mean, from my perspective, it's kind of taking stock in what the current sales process is and documenting it. I mean, I keep going back to that. Documenting it doesn't have to be, extremely immense, but just knowing and understanding what your own process is and being able to visually have that and look at it. It really helps. Chris, I'm sure you have other comments.
Yeah, I think we follow that sort of outline that Dan put there, is that the first phase is a discovery phase. With our clients, we work with them, we sit there and we talk through, we listen, we have a bunch of hours, and it's really, it might seem boring on its face, this part, right? But it's one of the most important parts, and that's information gathering. Like we said, we listen, we ride along, we're there, we're meeting with your sales team, we're understanding, we're calling in. It's that research phase. And you know what? Some companies come and they have a fairly defined process already. They have a lot of these documents and they're looking for improvements. And so we'll take that information and that maybe gets us a little bit further quicker. And some companies have zero process at all, right? So it depends on where you are, how big the business. But I think, Paul, and for the person that's asking the question, it really just starts with, hey, that mindfulness recognition, I need some help with my process. And then what we would do at Overit is we would get some hours and we would get in there and we would just start to discover the journey of the customer, figure that part out. And then from there, we do what we do in building out an infrastructure and using technological solutions that make sense for you and the size of your business.
Okay. So Dan, Chris, let me throw just kind of a parting thought question at you guys. If you were, and you are, talking to people that are responsible for sales and lead gen within their organization, related to this topic or not, if you could give that person one point of advice, one parting thought, one kind of takeaway, to help their business, what would it be?
Dan, me?
Me, I'm going to go back to understanding, the journey, and understanding how your process works. Because innately your sales team are, they're innately good or they're not, but when it comes down to actually having, a solidified process and clarity around that, I think that's extremely important. Just having an understanding how things work is critical to me.
One question I like to ask somebody is, if you're not actively selling, are you in fact selling? And I know that sounds a little bit bizarre, but what I mean by that is, Do you have a process in your business where you might not be on the phone with someone and you might not actually be working the phone or working the lead, but are you in the background working leads and selling? And if the answer is no, that means your process can be improved, because in today's age of technology, there are systems, and this is what comes out of sales enablement, that allow you to continue to sell even when you're not actually selling. And that's really what's going to pick up the slack. And for those leads that sort of get dropped or get mismanaged, or there's just not enough people to work them, this is really what actually takes, if your conversion rate is 20%, this is what's going to get it to go up to 35, 40%. It's going to be this behind the scenes selling and this continual pushing. So I think for what I would ask is that I always get a good sense of someone's robustness of sales process by asking, when you're not on the phone or you're not actually selling, is anything being sold? And if the answer is no, then there's a lot of work that can be done, right? Even if it's yes, I'm sure there's work to be done, but that's like a gauge for us on how advanced the system actually is.
Yeah, and I think people should understand and be aware that 40% of buyer decisions and people buying things are actually prefer not. 40% prefer not to deal with a human.
Right.
So that's why your content strategy and having a sales enablement process that's working for you as part of your sales and marketing team is critical for the future. And you're only going to see that number rise in the next, 5 to 10 years. It's going to be interesting to see where that goes, and buyer behavior. We work with a lot of clients. One of our main objectives for in the home services industry, we need to be booking appointments without interacting with humans, because millennials who are now new home buyers, we have to make sure that they're able to have a very easy customer journey that they want. So we have to, and that's when it gets into Chris's world of looking at the personas and looking at buyer behavior. So it's very critical. Just wanted to mention that.
And also coming out of this pandemic, which has sort of kept us indoors and more online, we don't know how much that'll pivot back. We might be in a new age going forward where that 40% goes up. More people rather not deal with humans. They might not go out as much. They're just looking to get what they need to get done online. So again, to Dan's point of being fluid, this is where your processes have to keep being updated. So if getting your process and sales enablement process really aligning your two only helps, right? It only helps. I think one of the reasons why people don't really venture into it is it could be daunting. It could be like, I don't know what to do. So I hope at least today with this presentation in this webinar, we got into your head a bit of what it means to have an aligned process and what you can do once you have that process enabled.
Yeah. And we're happy to talk to anyone at any time. We love talking about this stuff.
Clearly.
It's kind of our passion, as demented as that may be. But we're happy to talk to anybody. If they have any questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, and to that end, thank you everyone that's here live, anybody that's registered through Zoom, or if you're watching this on demand in the future, you'll see a link, and we'll share a link with you to the presentation deck, as well as contact information for Chris and Dan. So thank you to everybody that tuned in. And actually, wait, I have one last question. Where did Dan get his hat?
It's a Boston Scully.
It's a Boston Scully. Awesome.
Yeah,
Good to know.
I'm sure they've targeted you on Facebook.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian, for that question. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll follow up with not only a recording if you'd like to watch this again, but also a copy of the deck and contact information for the panelists. So thank you to everybody that joined us here, and for those of you watching live on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks everybody.